My name is Lyric Bartholomew, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So as a professor, I'm a scientist and a teacher, and a lot of what I do is I manage a research lab. I have about a dozen employees that work in my lab doing the various projects of interest to us for our research on mosquitoes and mosquito-borne disease. I think what really got me interested in science was insects, probably. Watching little tiny things and thinking about how they exist in a much bigger universe. I think a lot of the learning that we do as kids and as people is outside of the classroom. In retrospect, a lot of my scientific knowledge and enthusiasm came from just being outside. I think the way my brain works is that I have sort of a keen eye for small details. Even now when I'm walking across campus, if I see an insect in April in Wisconsin, I'll be the first one to squat down and watch it for a few minutes just to see what it's doing and how well it's moving depending on the temperature. Once I got to the university and started taking classes in microbiology and in disease, it occurred to me that if I could marry those two interests, the interest in entomology and the interest in disease, that maybe I would have a kind of career path. And I ended up getting to go to graduate school in a lab where I studied mosquitoes and mosquito-borne disease. What I wanted to do was try and find ways to make it so a mosquito would be less likely to transmit pathogens. I did that graduate work, and that set me up to go to Iowa State University to work as a professor there for 9 years. And then I got actually hired back at the university where I did my PhD. And now I actually run the lab where I was working on my PhD. So I've kind of come full circle. The guiding force in all the things that we do in my lab is to try and improve health for people. One of the most powerful interventions to protecting people from mosquito-borne diseases is to prevent them from ever getting bitten by a mosquito, from ever getting bitten by a mosquito that's actually infected with the pathogen. What we'd like to know is how they respond to infection, and if there are ways, for example, that we could enhance how they respond to an infection, so we could make a mosquito so that it won't transmit a virus. I think the things that I learned in college that were most informative were the real specifics, basic mosquito biology, like you saw actually in the lab today, or that we're seeing in the Mosquitoes and Me camp, but at a finer level of detail. So with the Mosquitoes and Me curriculum or the Mosquitoes and Me class, we can learn about how a mosquito goes from being an egg to a larva to a pupa and then an adult. And then once you start taking more specialized classes, you can learn about all of the hormones, for example, that are involved inside the body of the mosquito to make those molting events take place so that the mosquito can grow. And you learn about things like how the exoskeleton of the mosquito has to change in order for it to molt and grow. So the things I learned in college did absolutely set me up for the things that we do in the lab all the time now. My science actually is taking place in all of the spaces where I am. Honestly, I spend a lot of time in my office because I run a lab and I'm working hard all the time to get funding for the lab, to write papers to show that my lab is productive, so that I can be on the phone connecting with my colleagues, talking about different sort of opportunities that we might take on together. In the classroom, I get to teach science. That's really fun. So I get to teach students about parasites like malaria parasites that are transmitted by mosquitoes. And then I do, of course, science in the lab, and most of the science I do in the lab is through this group of really wonderful students and staff that work with me. We talk about their results from their experiments and think about ways to redesign their experiments. Some of the science that we do also is in the field, and so sometimes we go out and try and find where mosquitoes or ticks are in the environment. So some of my science takes place even in different countries across the world, which is really exciting. So science is actually completely dependent on collaboration. I can do very little totally on my own. Science requires us to tap into the expertise and resources and skill sets of all kinds of people to answer big questions. So that's what is really wonderful about being at a research university like Iowa State or like the University of Wisconsin, because we have all these different departments with people that have very extensive and deep scientific expertise in their area, but they're willing to share it with other people. So the nature of science really is that in order to make progress, we have to collaborate. The world needs kids to get excited about and be scientists, to just continue to innovate. Science takes the perspectives of a lot of different people. And so, my experience with entomology, for example, and getting excited about mosquito biology and then mosquito-borne disease transmission was my experience that was uniquely grown out of the house that I grew up in and the classes that I ended up taking and the teachers I ended up having. And so my perspective as a scientist is really unique. It's like a fingerprint, and I'm just one teeny tiny bit of sand in a whole beach of people that are moving science forward. And so it takes all of us to come together with our own unique perspectives to ask different questions and take different approaches to asking those and answering those questions. And we need all of the human power we can get to put toward that, to continue to be creative and innovative and teach and learn and do outreach, all of the things that we do as scientists. The most pressing thing right now is coming up with new strategies to control mosquitoes. There was a perception in the 1940s and 50s that there wouldn't be any need for mosquito biologists because we had really powerful insecticides that could wipe out mosquitoes. And so people thought this will be a dying field because we've got a handle on it, we've got control. And what we really rapidly learned was that when you use the same kinds of insecticides over and over and over again, mosquitoes evolve, especially when you use a really powerful insecticide that's designed to kill a mosquito. It's going to adapt. Pretty rapidly, mosquitoes adapted to those insecticides, and they were no longer effective. We definitely didn't have the problem solved then, and we don't have it solved now. There's a wide open opportunity to find ways to control mosquitoes that are environmentally friendly, that are less harmful to our environment and less harmful to other animals. Those would be noble and lofty and really great goals for some next generation scientists to take on. I'm super fortunate to be where I am, and I never would have imagined when I was, 9 or 11 or 13, even 25 years old, that I would end up being a professor. But I have the best job, and I'm so fortunate because I get to work with people from all over the world. I get to teach and be inspired by students who are exceptionally interesting people, and I get to continue to do science and find these questions that just could fuel years of work for additional students in the lab. And the fun never stops.